All right. So ILS, the full form of ILS is Instrument Landing System. So as the word suggests, it is used for landing, making approaches, and that is all its primary usage. On the screen, you can see simply the difference in depth of modulation is the principle of operation of the same. Okay, and here you'll see the facility itself is okay. These areas, small areas, are known as the localizer areas, and we'll study one by one all the components of the atlas. Now, I must have told you that there are two types of approach systems. One is the precision approach system, and the second is the non-precision approach. Now, if I want to recall the same thing, I will write it here. Why ILS is termed as a precision approach system? Can someone tell me? Yes, please go on.
Could you repeat the question why LSS is called precision approach system?
Yes. Just tell me, why is ILS known as a precision approach system?
Because it gives us both the slant height and guidance.
Correct. Both of you are partially correct, because it is giving us guidance in both our horizontal and our vertical plane. So that is why it is known as precision approach. Until up till now, we were discussing only non-precision approaches. That was your VOR, NDB, VDF. Why? Because they were giving us only horizontal distance or horizontal guidance. No one was actually telling us how much are we above or below the ground. So this system is one of the ones which is given as a precision approach, one of the precision approach systems. Why? Because it is giving us both in horizontal and vertical plane the guidance. If you see this diagram, you'll understand more here. This is the runway. You can see the aircraft coming in for landing. Now, if you see, it makes like a square shape in order to provide the aircraft guidance. What is the square shape? It will let the aircraft or the pilot know if they are deviating up or down, or if they are going left and right of the desired track. Okay, they can keep on following this rectangle or square, and until they will reach the runway. That is how you use the ILS. ILS provides the pilot with visual instructions in the cockpit to enable him to fly the aircraft down to the predetermined glide path and extended runway centerline. Now, what are these things? We'll explain one by one what are these things, but you can see this line that is extended from the runway center, that is known as extended runway center line. Now, always you will see the instructors that you will be flying with, they will always ask you to fly on this particular line, which is the extended runway center line. Why? Because this is the desired glide path, and we'll discuss this more. Now, if you see the last point, I was saying decision height. You need to understand precision approach systems have something known as decision height. Now, who will tell me what is a decision height? Pooja, your internet is fluctuating.
Yeah, I got disconnected.
Okay. Anyways, I was just discussing that both azimuth, that is horizontal, and vertical planes are involved in this. Then I moved on, asking you why and what is decision height or decision altitude in the precision approach system.
You're asking me.
Yes, any one of you, what is decision height?
So the height at which we decide whether we have to go around or continue with our time.
Correct. That is known as decision height or altitude. In the precision approach system, we decide whether we have to carry out a missed approach procedure or should we continue for landing. Whereas in a non-precision approach, the same height or altitude is known as minimum descent altitude. And for the same, we have a go around. Okay. So if we are going visuals or we are following a non-precision approach, if we want to, if at minimum descent altitude, we are not satisfied with the visibility of the runway, or we are not able to identify the runway markings, we will initiate a go around. The same thing in precision approach is termed as missed approach procedure. Why? Because in a precision approach, we are solely depending on what? The instruments. We are relying on the instruments. That is why the missed approach procedure is also relied upon the instruments. Whereas the go around is a visual thing. And we always do that in a non-precision approach. The type of emission or the emission code in ILS is alpha 8 whiskey. Now alpha is again used for modulated. Now why I'm presenting this? Because modulation is required for humans to able to receive the information or able to hear that particular frequency. What is it saying? Or the Morse code itself. We have three components here. One is the LLZ, which is also known as localizer. Then we have the glide path, that is GP or the glide path. Finally, we have marker beacons. These are like NDB or VOR. They will give you the distance. So these will be marker beacons. These are three components. We'll discuss individually each of them. As I told you, the first one is the localizer, LLZ. Now localizer, you've already seen the picture. I'll present it here also. These small areas put together in a horizontal method or a way, okay, are termed together as a localizer. Now you can always see that they are horizontally opposed or they are horizontally present. So that means that they are horizontally polarized areas. For approach guidance in the azimuth along the extended runway center line, that dot 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 thing, that is the extended runway center line. The localizer, the LLZ, transmits in the VHF band, very important, okay, is located about 300 meters from the upwind end. Now, who will tell me what is an upwind end?
So if you're taking off the end of that side.
Perfect. Okay. Viraj, you would like to add something?
Takeoff path.
Correct, correct. So if this is my runway, okay, let's say this is my runway, my aircraft will take off from this side. So this is the upwind end. So 300 meters from this, mostly we have this localizer established. The localizer transmits two overlapping lobes. Now this is where the principle of operation comes in play. Transmits two overlapping lobes on the same frequency but modulated differently. I don't have to explain you modulation again. So this is the frequency in use. We'll discuss the principle of operation more. Don't worry. The frequency is 108 to 111.975. The important thing to remember is that the odd number of decimals are used in this. For example, 108.5, or it could be 55, anything. 108.75 or 70. All these frequencies are the localizer frequencies. Remember, localizer uses the VHF band. And as I told you, this is the plus 0.05 megahertz is the value. All right, let's come to the principle of operations of the localizer. If you see what I told you, lobes. What are lobes? Lobes are an aerial gives out a lobe like this. This shape is known as lobe. Now an aerial is what? That antenna. That antenna is given off this lobe. Now there are two different modulated lobes that are given out by the aerials. Altogether, there are multiple areas you can see that they have designed such a way that they will give a different modulation. What happens is, see this diagram. This is the extended center line. So the aircraft will be coming in this direction. Over this, you can see the runway. So the intention of the aircraft is to land over this runway. Let's look at the perspective of the aircraft. If you look at the perspective of the aircraft, to the right side, you have 150 hertz modulated signal. And to the left side, you have 90 hertz modulated signal. Why I'm explaining you this? Because this is the principle of operation itself. What happens is when the aircraft.
Why is it like that?
Sorry? What is the difference?
Yeah, why is that?
That is the difference because of the modulation. Now it depends on the manufacturers of that aerial, which type of modulation would they like to produce from their aerials or the antennas. they decided that half of them will produce 150 and at half they will be producing 90. Now, why is this? Because our principle of operation of localizer is to find the place where we have zero difference in these modulations. We want to find a line in middle where we receive equal number of 150 hertz and equal number of 90 hertz signal. That line is our center or extended runway center line. And that is the only line we will have zero difference in depth of modulation. Where I told you in the beginning also, this is our principle of operation. This is what we aim at. Now let's look at another perspective. If suppose the aircraft is not on the extended center line, where it will be? Let's suppose that it is on the right side. Our aircraft is somewhere here and it is trying to make an approach. So what will happen now? Okay, what will happen now? Let's look at that. When our aircraft is to the right of the center line, the extended center line in air, the aircraft will receive more of 150 hertz signal that will be depicted on the CDI or HSI. You can see that the signal is what? The radial comes to the left. So our aircraft goes to the right, the radial comes to the left, indicating the pilot, please fly to the left. That is where our center line is. The opposite will happen with the left one. Now do you understand? The right one is also, the right one, as the color indicates, is also known as blue sector, and the left one is known as the yellow sector. The depth of modulation increases away from the center line. Okay. This is the example which I just gave you. An aircraft approaching the runway center line from right will receive more of 150 hertz. This difference in depth of modulation, or simply DDM, relates to the angular displacement of the aircraft from the center line. It energizes the vertical needle of the ILS indicator to go left. In simple words, this is what we're looking for. A difference in the depth of modulation of 0 indicates a balance between both of these lobes or these modulation. A 0 needle deflection, and hence the runway center line would be there. And that is what we are aiming at. Just in the center. Any doubts in this? All right. So in exams, what you can be asked is simply which side, left or right, is 90 hertz and which side is 150 hertz. Now, how to remember that? There's a simple trick. When you're coming in the aircraft, okay, to the right you have what? You have 150 hertz. Just simply remember, in the world we have more number of people who write with the right hand. So we have 150, that is more, and 90 to the left. So lefty are less and righty are more. So you can remember this as a trick. Otherwise, you should remember the principal operation itself. So let's cover now what is the sector or coverage area of this particular localizer. If you see the diagram, this is our localizer. Okay, if you see the localizer, this is where it starts. Okay, this is where it starts. You can see the maximum distance it can go or cover is 25 nautical miles. That is 25 nautical miles. And the amount of angle or the degree which is covering is in total 20 degrees. 10 degrees to the left and 10 degrees to the right. That means that an aircraft at least has to come within 25 nautical mile of the ILS localizer in order to capture its signal. Okay. As soon as the aircraft comes closer, you can see the amount of angle deviation increases. Why? Because sensitivity increases as you go close to the particular radio area. Okay. That is, these things are important. You need to remember these values as well. These are the coverage areas. Do you have any doubts in this? All right. Now comes the interesting part. Now we were making an approach normally, and that is your normal approach ILS. But there is something because of the parts in the localizer, which are metallic parts. The aerials are made of metals. Okay, so there will be a metallic part in this. What happens is, because of these metallic parts inside, radio waves are reflected towards the back. Okay, normally an aircraft will be making an approach like this. Of course, normally an aircraft is making an approach like this. But because the aerials have a metallic part, they will reflect the signals towards the back also. So by chance, today you were not going for runway 35, you were coming in for landing to runway 17. Okay. What happens to 17? You are making an approach. Now, now if concentrate here carefully. I'm making an approach from this side. Now to the left, I have 150 hertz, and to the right, I have 90 hertz. So I will have something called reverse sensing. Okay, on my CDI or a HSI, I will have something called reverse sensing, because if I go to the left, my radial will also go to the left. So the CDI will show me the reverse signals. This is known as back course approach, and it is illegal to fly that in India. In some part of USA, you are allowed to fly that, but in India, it is illegal or it is banned. So the disadvantages of back courses are following. The glide path will not be present. Why? Because we are not discussing any glide path signals right now. We're just discussing the localizer signals. The CDI needle is sense reversed, which I've already told you. There are no range check markers, which are your marker beacons. Now tell me if you have any doubt in this. No?
No.
All right. Let's come to the second installation. The second one is our lovely glide path. The glide path is a unique thing. It is not present in normal VOR and NDBs. That is why this is making it a precision approach system by providing a vertical guidance system. If you see, this is the tower of your glide path. Okay. If you see, this is the glide path, it will indicate you the vertical angular distance or angular, vertical distance with the ground. The glide path transmits in the UHF, that is ultra high. It is not VHF, it is UHF. Okay, something is happening with the internet, I think. Let me check mine also. Mine is good. All right. Yes, the glide path operates in the UHF and the localizer did in VHF. So that is a difference. That is why I'm highlighting it here. Please remember this. Ultra high frequency band. It is located 300 meters in from the threshold and about 200 meters from the runway edge. I'll explain you with the picture. If you see this picture also, the runway is over here. So you can see it is not on the runway, it is not beside the runway, it is a little far away from the runway. The DDM, the difference in the depth of modulation, is again 0 at the selected glide slope, which is generally 3 degrees. Must have heard 3-degree glide slope, 3-degree glide slope. This is the reason. The frequency is 329.15 to 335 megahertz. Only 40 channels are covered in this. Now, you must be thinking in videos and in your aircraft also, you have only tuned into the localizer frequency, let's say 108.5, and you get both the systems. You get both the signals of your glide path and your localizer. How is that possible? I explained you in your previous chapter something known as co-location. Okay, co-location was simply that if a VOR and a DME are put together or are close by, they can be clubbed together to operate with the same frequency. So the pilot does not have to put in the frequencies of different navets, reducing the workload of the pilot. So the same thing goes here as well. If these two particular instruments or the navets are present close by, you can simply tune into the localizer frequency and you will get both these signals. So you don't have to tune in the frequency of the glide path individually. That's what I've written here, frequency pairing. The GP frequency is paired with the localizer. Selection of the frequency is automatic. This reduces the pilot's workload. All right. Let's discuss the principle of the glide path also. It is just exactly the replica of your localizer. Okay. There are two lobes. There are two different sets of lobe. One is 150 hertz, the other is 90 hertz. Except there is a bit difference. What? You can see the 90 hertz globe. It's a huge one. Okay. The 90 hertz lobe is a huge one. Whereas these 150 hertz, if you see the lines of black lines inside it, the 150 hertz, this one, are smaller ones and they are narrow. Now, who will tell me why are these lobes narrow? 150 hertz. Just apply some common sense here. You might find the answer because we discussed that in the first or second chapter also.
Deviation.
Not deviation. Okay, we'll get the answer here, no problem. So let's discuss the principal operation of this first. As I told you, there are two sets of modulation. One is 150 hertz and the second is 90 hertz. If you see closely, this is our true glide path, which should be present at 3 degrees. 3 degrees would be the true glide path, and that happens just when the 150 hertz has halfway through 90 hertz. So this is a big one, and you can see that halfway through the 150 hertz we are being covered. So again, if I follow my true glide slope or glide path signal line, that is 3 degrees, that will have zero depth or the zero difference in depth of modulation. That is what we are looking at. That is what our CDI and HSI is looking at. Now again, if you want to remember the 150 and 90 hertz, simple method is 150 is greater than 90, right? So 150 is heavier. That is why 150 is light below this 90 hertz. 90 hertz is above and 150 is below. We're talking about the true signal now. We'll discuss about these different 150 also. I'm just talking about this first lobe of 150 and this huge lobe of 90 hertz. All right. The glide path, usually 3 degree, is an ICAO requirement. Okay, it should be between 2 to 4. We'll discuss the accuracy limits and what should be the deviation and all. Is defined where the DDM or the difference in depth of modulation of the overlapping lobe is 0. Okay, the ILS indicator's glide path needle will indicate 0 deviation. Okay, the coverage area of them are in theta. Now, why are they in theta? Because this theta is what? The desired glide path angle. Okay. Now, if you know what is the desired glide path angle here, 0.45 into 3 gives you the first value, what it is equal to 1.35. Yeah. To 1.75 into 3, because the desired one is 3 again here. So it becomes how much? It becomes 4.5, 5.25. So our values come to 1.35 to 5.25. Now what is this? Look at this diagram and understand what I'm trying to say. From my first to second, this is my correct one. This is the 3 degree glide slope. So below I will have 1.35 and above I will have 5.25. If my aircraft is coming within these two angles towards the runway, okay, I will get my true glide slope signals. Okay, the lower limit can also be reduced to 0.3 theta, but that depends on the procedures and different airports. What is the azimuth coverage? The glide path also has the azimuth coverage. Why? Of course, there will be a limit to which these signals can be transmitted, and it is less than the localizer. It is only 10 nautical miles. So you need to understand how this is working. Okay, till now what we have understood is two things: localizer and glide path. So how this work? First, you are navigating in your aircraft. You are cruising and you're navigating. Okay. Now the ATC tells you to come in for the approach. So you quickly prepare yourself for the approach. Now what is, as a pilot, you will be doing? Firstly, you'll tune to the ILS frequency. Okay. Once you tune to that, your CDI and HSI will start to behave like that. They will start to hunt for this ILS or localizer frequency. When they finally find it, they'll find firstly the localizer, because that is 25 nautical miles. Once they find that, then they will be looking for what? They will be looking for glide path signals. That is 10 nautical miles. So this is how the principle will work one by one. You can see this is the azimuth. So this is my glide slope starting, and till 10 nautical mile only we are having coverage. Do you have any doubts in this? All right.
No, sir.
All right. There is something false glide slope also. You saw one thing, that there were number of 150 hertz signals. Now that is because if I draw a diagram here, Okay, this is my antenna of my glide path. So okay, I understand that this is my 3 degree, but some of the signals might bounce here and go up. So now what we're having are, these are known as false glide slope signals. We wanted the 3 degree, but because of reflection from the ground itself, we are getting something higher. Now these are not dangerous to you. Okay, why? Because what are we trying to achieve by a glide slope, vertical distance? Why? What are we achieving? If there is any mountain, if there are buildings, we are getting through them. Okay, we are getting past through them without any danger. Suppose that we have a signal which is above this. We are clear of the danger. We are clear of the obstacle. So this is not a hazard to you. But yes, once you come in for landing and you just are reaching the runway, suppose there's a huge fog and you are coming in for landing blindly. You're following instead of 3 degree, let's say 6 degree glide slope. And you're following and you come here on the runway, you will see the runway like this. If you see the runway like this, it's like a disaster for you, because if you want to go around and do a misapproach procedure, it'll be hazard to you then. That is why it is somewhat a hazard, but initially it is not for you. You will not be doing any cat 2 cat 3 approaches initially. So what is this glide slope? You need to understand, this is the aircraft. As I told you, 6 degrees, 9 degrees, at 3 degree interval, these are happening. Okay, this is the correct one. And that is the sole reason all the pilots, or as a procedure, we always intercept the glide path from below. We never will be coming from above and intercept this. Why? Because there are high chances that we will think that this is the correct glide slope. Okay, so the procedure laid down by all the authorities is intercept the glide slope from below. Okay, so why are these false glide slopes? As I told you, reflections. Okay, false glide slopes always occur above the glide slope. True glide slope should not constitute a danger, but pilots should be aware of that presence. Any questions in this? No. Perfect. Okay. Note, normal flying practice is to establish to the localizer and then intercept the glide slope from below. As I told you, the same thing. Lastly, we come to the last installation, which is the marker beacons, which is not normally present in normal airports. But if you have a huge number of traffic, then this is present. These are known as marker beacons. Now, marker beacons are just like a VOR or a NDB. They indicate you the distance. Marker beacons transmit at 75 megahertz, that is VHF band. There is no interference problem as the radiation is transferred from areas which are shaped like a fan. If you see, these are shaped like a fan. Okay. Now, as you can see on the screen, there are 3 different marker beacons present at different intervals or distance. The first one is your outer, middle, and finally your inner. This is simply to guide you to the runway. Okay, this is simply to make sure that the pilots are correctly descending. Why? The same reason I discussed before. The glide slope is very sensitive. The glide path is very sensitive. It will only provide you till 10 nautical miles. Before then, what? How will you establish where is the runway? You can use a VOR, but what about ILS? How will you establish on the ILS? So this is where the marker beacons play the role. And as I told you, it is not a necessity to install them. It is just that it makes traffic to monitor or manage properly. What are the types of questions marker beacons could be asked? Simple. What color is this? Okay, what color is your outer marker? What color is your middle marker and the marker? So these are the colors: blue, amber, white. Amber is like a yellow color. So these are the colors. Now, ident is also important. Why? See, there is a beautiful system installed on your aircraft, which will have, let's say, blue, amber, and white. These colors will be present. What happens is, whenever the aircraft is above outer marker, we will have the blue indication lit up. When the aircraft is above the middle marker, the amber will go up. So this will keep on going. But pilots are so focused on the approach, they are monitoring so many instruments, they're communicating as well. There are chances that they can forget to see these lights. Okay, So what people did, or engineers did, they designed a feature called identification. That means that whenever they are flying over a particular marker beacon, they will hear these types of voice. What is this? Dashes, dash per seconds. Okay, 2 per second. For middle marker, what is that? It is alternate dash. Okay, alternate dot and dishes. That is dit da, like this. That's the Morse code. We'll hear this dit da, and this is what dit. That is 6 dots per second. So that is what enables the pilots to keep their focus on the runway or their whatever they are focusing on and listen. Then we have the frequency. They all have their own modulating frequency. That is why they have a uniqueness, right? They have 400 hertz, 1300 hertz, and 3000 hertz. Pitch is not required, but yeah, you can just know for curiosity. Touchdown range, these are ranges. Okay, you can see the outer marker is at least 6 nautical miles outbound, and as you come close, it keeps on increasing. So this is the guidance feature. Now, how does this marker beacon help a pilot? You can see that these are established at different distances. You will have a chart that is a Jepson chart or any Airport Authority of India chart that will specify that at 6 nautical mile, you should be around 5,000 feet. I'm giving an example, okay? So as a pilot, you should be at 5,000 feet on this outer marker. The pilots, when they will hear this okay, like this, they should know that they are over the outer marker. They will quickly cross-check with the altitude. Is it 5,000 feet or not? And they will get to know they are on the correct glide path. Why? Secondary reason is you cannot rely solely on your CDI HSI. Many conditions take place where CDI HSI are failed. Also, you can have a system like this as a backup also. You can see total in all, this is how the outlay is. This is the localizer. Okay, we have the two signals, the two modulated signal lobes, and this is the glide slope. We have again two modulated signals. Okay, as I told you, some IC installers have a co-located powered NDB called locator or simply outer marker. That is the part of the NDB. A DME, that is frequency paired with ILS supplements, replaces the range information markers. So now comes the technology. Now marker beacons or the NDBs were absolute technology, right? Sorry, obsolete technology. So we don't use them these days. Instead of that, we will use a DME. DME comes here again. So we can install a DME, which is referenced to the ILS runway threshold. What is ILS runway threshold? If you see this part where this runway starts, that is my threshold. That is a threshold. So the DME, the ILS DME is actually made sure that it will indicate zero nautical miles at this reference. Or here you will see this 0 nautical mile. And this is just when it will be given you, it is mandatory to speak ILS, DME, whatever it is. Okay, you have to specify when you're making an approach whether you're following the ILS DME or you're following the VOR, so that other pilots who are on the approach, they know, because there might be a difference between this. Why? Because your DME installation of a VOR might be here. So there might be around 1 nautical mile gap. You can't tolerate such things while making an approach because you're not the sole person flying in the air. All right, so we'll summarize with this. Okay, these are the codes. As I told you, did da. Now who will tell me what is the BC in your ILS? What is a BC?
Voice recorder.
BC is voice recorder.
On ILS, you said, no?
Yeah, so what is Bravo Charlie in a ILS system?
BC, I would.
नीचे लिखा है. Yeah, Yuvraj. Yuvraj, not there. Thinking. Okay. Pooja, you must know this.
About 1 second.
Okay. It's known as back course. Okay, we discussed this. It is banned in India, but of course it is present somewhere in the world. So if you're following the back course of an ILS approach, you will be constantly hearing this code. Okay. Anyways, not used in India, not will be required in DGC also. The ident on the localizer is such 2 or 3 Morse code signals which are grouped and this not required, but what I'm trying to say is it will be like a VOR station code is how it is Delta Papa November in 3 digits or 3 letters. The ILS would be I, that is India, then followed by whatever the signal is. Foxtrot Sierra Golf for Foxtrot. So India Foxtrot Sierra Golf is an example of your station identification code of an ILS. So always the I letter will be the pre. Okay, in the pre there will be a right. Then just like a viewer, we had an automatic monitoring. In your ILS also we have an automatic monitoring or a ground monitor. Okay, this equipment will only act when one of these things happen. Okay, one of or all of any of them happen. The localizer at the reference datum shifts from the runway center line by more than 35 feet. Okay, for category 1 and these, I'll discuss what are these categories. But right now you don't need to understand, you just need to remember them. The glide path angle changes from, well, remember this was the first value. If this changes, then we also have there's a power reduction in the output of more than 50%. If suppose that electricity supply goes off by 50% or more, then also the ground monitor will shut off itself. Now what will happen? It will stop all the transmissions, it will remove the ident, and it will also permit the operations to a lower category. That means that if you're flying on category 3 ILS, it will degrade to category 2 or 1, so that the accuracy does not permit the aircraft to go somewhere else or cause a disaster. Now, whenever this happens, you need to understand carefully that CDI and HSI are always receiving the signals. And at the moment when they do not receive a signal, what will happen? There will be a red flag. That means to the pilot, please stop using this. It is unserviceable. I was telling you, I will define the categories as well. There are 3 different basic categories. The categories are only dependent on the instruments the aircraft has on board. Okay, there are different things which we are required, equipments on board or instruments on board which are required. Even the pilot has to go through a number of checks before they are approved for that category, because it demands a lot of precision and experience. Category 1 is usually approved to the people who have flown in an ILS. Like me, I am category 1 approved ILS. So that is a normal thing. So what is the decision height? I already told you. So if the decision height is more than 200 feet, that will be category 1. Now RVR is something new, I think. I will explain you RVR. It is a runway visual range. If you were to stand on your Baramati runway today, okay, and if you look at the far end, whatever the distance you can see, that means that is the RVR of today. That is actually measured by transmissometer. It's not present in this, but I'm just giving you. It's present in your metrology. Yuvraj might know this. So we have visibility also. I don't have to explain visibility, but RVR is more important. We'll see for category 2 also, we have RVR and decision height. These decision heights and categories are very, very important. There are in your regulations, navigation, your RTR, and even your airline interviews. Okay, so you can just take a printout of them and paste it on a wall or something. Keep going on and revising them. As I told you, there are 3 distinctive categories, but the third category itself is divided into subcategories. The first one is A, second is Bravo, and then we have Charlie. If you see the decision height in Bravo, it is just 15 feet. That is somehow even the height of an aircraft. Okay, 15 feet is nothing in comparison to an aircraft. So that is the level of accuracy the pilots require. Now you have to tell me in India which airports do have the category 3 AV permissions or permits. Okay, find it out. Let me know tomorrow or whenever the class is. Okay, category 3C, it has 0 feet of decision height. So until and unless the aircraft touches down or the threshold becomes 0, till that moment the guidance will go on. Finally, we have RVR also 0. And also let me know where the category 3 Charlie is installed in airports. Okay, both of them, let me know which airports do have all of them. Any doubts on this?
No.
Pooja, you also don't know?
Sorry, you said X clouds. I said no.
Yeah, I understand that, but I asked you a question, right?
Cat 3, no? Cat 3C.
Mm.
I know the answer.
Which airports have it?
None of the airports.
Cat 3 Bravo. Which one has it?
Bangalore.
Good, very good. Any other? Okay. There are others also. Okay. Find it out and let me know. It's very interesting topic and it's a hot topic in the हाँ
Yes, Chandigarh.
Chandigarh. हाँ Chandigarh. Fine. Okay. So we have a long time. You can discuss it. Let me know. We'll just discuss the last thing. ILS reference datum point. Now this is simple to the threshold. Okay. If you see, this is my runway. This is my localizer. Runway, glide path. Okay. So this is the threshold. Wherever the threshold and okay, let's draw like this. This is my threshold. Okay. And what? How is the how is the glide path? It will be like this. Okay. So if this is my runway, this is the threshold. This is my glide path. What is happening here is I'm creating an angle. This is my 3-degree angle. Okay. If you see, there is a gap between the height. Okay. This gap is approximately 50 feet. And wherever these are intersection, wherever they are intersecting, okay, this glide path and the threshold, that is my reference datum point of INS. If you see this arrow, it is directly here. The height above this point is 50 feet. 50 feet is also considered as a screen height. Okay, screen height is something which is very important in terms of flying. Okay, if you don't know right now, I'll not introduce it right now, but it's a really good thing to explain. Okay, anyways, you can see the aircraft. Aircraft is coming in, it is intercepting from the below of the intended glide path or the 3-degree glide path. When it is intercepted it is following the outer marker, the middle marker, and finally the inner marker, and it comes over the threshold and comes in for landing. In whole of this diagram, do you have any doubt? Every part I have explained. Okay, I don't think there should be any doubt. Yep. All right. Let's look at the pilot's perspective now. How does the pilot see the ILS representations? In the cockpit, we have CDI and HSI. I've already told you CDI and HSI, which are giving you the indication. The main difference to note is that on an HSI, there is a course selector which should be set on QDM of the runway. As I told you, the steps are simple, right? Frequency, then your frequency, then you have the radial, okay? Then you have your localizer set that is established of localizer, then you have glide path. If you see this is my deviation indicator or a CDI. Okay, you can see normal in a VOR we only had a lateral, but in this we have vertical also. Okay, so this also has 5 dots, but these 5 dots will represent something else. Okay, each dot here represents only half a degree of deflection or a half degree. Okay, you need to understand this carefully because ILS is very sensitive and ILS requires a lot of precision. VOR you just use it for navigation. Even if you have a 1 degree, 2 degree error, you will not hit any obstacle. But ILS is used for landing. You need to remember that. You can see the glide path signal needle also. This is the glide path needle. This will move up and down. And this one is the localizer. It will go left and right. The glide path needle also has this. Okay. So if it has 5 dots, that's equivalent to 2.5 degree of deflection. The inner circle is the first dot and all. Okay, as I told you, there's a flag also which appears. That flag, okay, these are the reasons I've already explained. And just to give you an insight, this is my OBS, Omni Bearing Selector. Just as like a VOR, we select a radial for landing as well. Radial for ILS. Okay, So it's not like an automatic system. You have to select the radial. You have to select the particular radial, right? So that is how the CDI or the HSI works. Any doubts in this? Pooja?
No, Captain.
All right. What is localizer versus glide path indication? I already explained it, but just in my own terms, I made it in the notes. Okay. You can see this is 0.5 per dot, and the full scale deflection indicates aircraft is 0.7 or more above. Now, as I told you, these are dots, right? 2.5 dots in the total. Okay. There are 5 different dots which will indicate that the aircraft is 2.5 degree left or right of the center line. Left or right of the center line. So the sensitivity becomes how? This becomes 0.5 per dot. Whereas the full scale deflection of a glide path, which is the up and down, is 0.7 or more. Or the below the glide path, it is 0.7 or more. So the total indication is 5 dots, okay, will be equal to 0.7 degrees. Okay, so 1 dot will be equal to how much? Okay, this is what is important. In the glide path, every dot indicates 0.14 degrees. Okay. Whereas for, as I told you, the localizer, we had an indication of 0.5 per dot, making it 1 dot is equal to 0.5 degrees. That is left and right of the center line. You can see here the video giving you an idea of how the aircraft will be coming in. These are our markers, outer marker, middle marker, inner marker. These are the lights which are indicating you. These are the marker beacons passing in. And you can also see the CDI here. Okay, as the aircraft comes below this, the radial goes up or the needle goes up. Why? Because that will indicate the pilot to go up. Okay, you can see this video once more. Both the localizer needle and my glide path needle are moving as per the aircraft movement. Okay, so always fly the needles. Okay, if the needle is going up, then you need to go up. If the needle is going to left, you have to go left. Errors and accuracy, the same errors which are in the VOR. Beam bends caused by the atmospheric conditions. These are the beam bends. This happens because of refraction conditions. You can see the beam is bending. As I discussed in the first slide as well, this is the costly installation. Scalloping happened in the VOR also, and in ILS also it happens. Beam noise is something very important here. I explained in the second chapter that because this is a electrical circuit. The circuits have a internal noise. This internal noise will affect the accuracy of the system, and that is the reason the beam noise is one of the reasons it is having an error. Okay, these are already covered, not much important. Okay, what is important is the protective areas of an ILS. If you see the protective areas of an ILS, this diagram is beautifully explaining it all. This aircraft is just making an approach, the blue one. Okay, the aircraft has just coming in approach. So what it will be using most of the signals of the ILS, right? So there is this point which is made so that the aircrafts cannot move ahead of this point before the ATC gives them permission. Why? Because if the aircraft was suppose standing here, okay, what will happen to the aircraft? What will happen to the signals? Because the aircraft also communicates, also has some their signals, there must be some inaccuracy or errors to the aircraft which are coming for landing. So this area is known as critical area. So even the movement of the aircraft is banned. There is an area defined dimensions about the localizer where vehicles, aircrafts are excluded during ILS operations. Then there is something called sensitive area. The sensitive area is little sensitive, but it is not critical. This area can have vehicles parked, but they cannot have any movement. Okay, this is beyond the critical area is where the parking or movement of vehicles and aircraft is controlled to prevent the possibility of unacceptable interference to the ILS during low visibility ILS operations. Then we have the holding points. That is not a part of your ILS, but holding points are basically to allow the aircraft to start the departure process or procedure. All right. The protection of ILS signals during category 2 and 3 operations may dictate that pre-takeoff holding points are more useless. So if you see the reality, how they look like, they are looking like this. ILS points. Okay. You can see here also the glide slope here works. So the aircraft will be coming in here. So we will not allow any other aircraft to taxi beyond this point. Why? Because the ILS glide slope will be like this. So if an aircraft proceeds ahead of this point, there will be some chances that you will not get any signal. So it will be like this. Okay. These are critical areas marked like this. Any questions of today? ILS?
No, Captain.
All right. Yuvraj, you have any questions? All right. So which airport in the world and India, you've already answered, Cat 3 operations are not present anywhere. Now tell me why. Why? And because if we had, then how will an aircraft taxi in category 3C Charlie operations if there is zero visibility? Is this the only reason?
zero.
So if the visibility is zero or the RVR is zero, suppose that your aircraft lands with the help of ILS. How will it taxi or how will it flare?
Yeah.
Yeah, so these are the reasons I've already answered. But anyways, it's a very interesting chapter. Go ahead to the questions. Were very simple. Okay, all on your mostly notes. You'll be able to do the questions. Okay, let's stop the recording now.